Say, Code on the Beach 2018, we are coming to an end. I know it's breaking everyone's heart in this room, but I can tell you right now that the organizers of the event are super stoked that we're starting to wrap up, because holy cow, we can actually go to sleep now. So we want to give a big shout out to Pete Cochran for stepping up and starting to run with this event. Pete put in some tireless hours. We also want to make sure that we're recognizing Paul and Katie Irwin for starting this event so long ago. What a great event, not only for the Jacksonville community, but for the technology community in general. I mean, it's got to be one of the best conferences in Northeast Florida, and I'm going to say it, in Florida itself. So again, thank you again, Paul and Katie Irwin. Make sure, if you have a chance, please go to our sponsors' websites. If they have like an Instagram page, Facebook page, anything like that, please follow it, like it. Make sure you're looking out. If you see anybody hiring, we've already talked about the market here, just not only in Jacksonville, but everywhere. Just spread the word. If you see one of our sponsors are looking to hire, let your networks know. You don't have to let your managers know if you're interested, but please go ahead and reach out. We've had a great weekend, a lot of great speakers. Excited to wrap it up with PeerFit. For those of you who don't know PeerFit, I don't know if anyone's heard the saying, sitting is the new smoking, right? And I'm pretty sure everyone in this room spends a ton of time in front of a monitor sitting down. Not all of us are fortunate enough to have stand-up desks. But what PeerFit does is PeerFit will work with your company to provide a healthy company culture, right? So if you like to work out, they're going to help give you access not just to gym memberships, but to premium gym memberships. And they'll help be able to get programs put into place to help get you back in shape, help take those medical costs down, right? Because obviously the older you get, if you're not in shape, the higher those medical costs are going to be. Ed Buckley, right here, is the CEO of PeerFit. Ed has an extreme interest in not only the wellness space, but also with behavioral research and entrepreneurship. Ed has worked with a number of different groups, raises funds for startups, and is partnered with a number of companies here in town, Aetna, St. Vincent's, and I'm sure I'm missing a whole bunch of other ones. But with no further ado, Ed Buckley.
Thank you. Can we just talk about the irony that he says sitting is the new smoking, and I'm looking out and I'm like, damn it, everyone's sitting down. Sorry. So hopefully we'll make this a pretty fun, interactive session. We're going to talk about a lot of what I think is interesting things, especially with everyone here's background, what you spent the last few days going into, and hopefully this gives you a broader perspective to take away to, whether you live here in Jacksonville or, wherever across the state. I did hear someone say, you're only in Florida once today. And I was like, really? Is that the saying? I didn't know that. So I thought about this talk a lot, right? This talk is all about making a bunch of really tiny pivots, having a lot of cycles to go through those, rather than sitting up in your ivory tower and saying, oh, this has got to be perfect before I launch it, right? It's got to be perfect before I deploy it. And that's really the opposite of the way I've always approached my life, my work, with almost everything I do. And so, when we named it Ready to Pivot, I thought about what are some of the other things that we could name this talk. And once again, pivoting is all about exponential growth. How do you have tons of cycles to go really, really fast, right? This is what we hope growth looks like usually. So the first thing I thought was, well, we could have named this talk Going the Wrong Way. And really, pivoting is about figuring out what not to do as much as it's about figuring out what to do. It's about figuring out, hey, let's not go down that path. This is the wrong way. Let's not do that again. Let's change the order of operations. And that in itself is a pretty remarkable success, because shoring up your liabilities can help you focus on the exact things that you need to do. The next thing I thought of, we could have named this What Not to Do, because I feel 80 to 90% of the experiments that I personally take, my teams take, don't work out. And think of how often you've invested days or weeks or months on a project, right? Writing code for it, speccing it out, ready to deploy, and then someone in a suit comes in and says, we're killing that, right? How defeated do you feel after you put all that time, energy, and effort into it? Or even worse, you get in halfway to the project and you're like, oh, this is not what we should be doing, right? Raise your hand, who's been there, right? How pissed are you when that happens, right? We've all been there. I mean, we were just working on a project literally a couple weeks ago where spent all this time, we filmed everything, we went through the editing phase, and Maria here's our vice president of marketing. We get through the whole process and we're like, this sucks. We can't launch this. And I mean, once in, we've spent tens of thousands of dollars, hundreds of hours, and we're like, it's crap. So, trust me, I've been there. And that's what I thought about this talk is really about, is let's acknowledge the fact that we all go through this, and how do you both acknowledge it quicker and shorten up those cycles? Once again, whether it's your exact day-to-day process or just the way you approach your life and really the way you approach your job. And I couldn't go through this talk without thinking really what this talk should have been about. How many of you remember Friends? That's all I could, every time I looked at the title of this talk, all I could see is Ross saying, pivot, right? That's all I could think about. So hopefully now let's acknowledge the elephant in the room here that I think we're all thinking about Ross when we hear this talk, right? But really what this talk is about is learning. Because in my mind, what exponential growth is about is quick learning cycles. That's really what today is about. So hopefully you actually learned something today other than that really cool new Friends graphic that you can use in the future. But I first wanted to explain who I am, because most of you probably have no clue who I am or necessarily even what PeerFit does. And you're like, why should I even listen to you while you're up here talking? So this is our, there's actually 3 eyes. This formatting is off. Should have had shorter cycles to get this done easier. My name is Ed. I am the CEO of PeerFit, and if you have not heard about PeerFit, it's really simple. For the longest time in worksite wellness, what people did was said, hey, Joe Smith, we care about you and we want you to go be active. So go join a gym membership like an LA Fitness, sign up for a year membership, and then every single month, print out your receipt, sign this form, scan it, and email it back in to me, the benefits person. Nope. Look, I love fitness, and I'm not going to do that. So what we said is, look, people want to hop around. They want to go to studios. They want to go to different gyms. They don't want to have to fill out paperwork. I mean, it is 2018. Why can't we make that really easy for them to do? And that's what we did. It was really simple. Think of an arcade, and you walk in, and you exchange your money for a pocket full of tokens, and you can figure out how to use them. Right? Maybe Skee Ball's 1 token, so you can play that a lot. Maybe Miss Pac-Man is 2, so you only played a few times. And the really cool, motorcycle game is 4 tokens, so you can only play it 1 time. Right? That's what we did for employers, was we created a digital token system where they can exchange their money, and then it goes out to everybody, except they only get charged when people use their tokens. So if I give you 20 tokens and you only use 10 of them, that's what the employer is going to get billed for. That's what we did at PeerFit. And PeerFit is probably one of the most ultimate examples of a lot of iterations really quickly. Trying out 10 things and 9 of them don't work. And that one that did work, it only kind of worked. But now we're going to focus all of our attention on that one step. That's what we did. How do you build a better mousetrap? And something that was taught to me really early on at PeerFit. I was out in Palo Alto at a conference, and they said, if you have to build a big machine, there's 2 ways to do it. You can build the whole machine at once, but when something breaks, you don't know which part it is. Or if you're playing the game Mousetrap. How many of you guys remember that game, Mousetrap, right? Good, you're all my age and older, thank heavens. Remember in Mousetrap, you don't build the whole thing at once. You build one contraption and make sure that it works. And then you build the second contraption, and if it doesn't work, well, you know it's part 2, because part 1 already works, right? And you build it in successive iterative design. That is probably the best example that we all learn as kids of how iterative process works. How do you pivot? How do you do it quickly? And how you can isolate off of that the way that you should be building. And that's what we've tried to do at PeerFit. So I'm going to kind of walk through different things here today. For those of you who have never seen this, this is the spiral process. This is iterative process 101. This is literally taken from a textbook. And yes, I have a PhD, so I'm a huge nerd, so I love pulling things from textbooks. The spiral design methodology is really simple. The idea is, in 4 steps, can I come up with an idea? Can I go get some input? Can I real-world test it? And then can I come back and reflect on what was broken, what was not, and then go one phase out on that? And then can I repeat that process? And the idea is, I'm going to go forward here, this is what spiral design looks like. Once again, look at this great textbook. You know, how many of you guys don't miss that? The idea is the further out from the center you go, right, the bigger and more successful your project is, no matter what that project is that you're working on. Heck, this could be your approach to buying a home, right? It doesn't matter how you use spiral design, iterative design, but the idea is you have rapid, quick cycles where you have an assumption, you go and get some input on that assumption, you go and test it in the field, and then you come back and basically do a recap. What worked, what didn't work, and now we're gonna go to phase 2. And you're gonna do version 2 of it, then version 3 of it, then version 4 of it. And next thing you know, rather than taking a week, just do one perfect one, you've had 5 versions of it in a week. That is, in my opinion, the heart of what disruption and innovation are about. And do you know what is so great about this process? You don't have to be the smartest person to beat the smartest person, right? You just need to have an idea. And guess what? It could be terrible, but all you need to do is get moving with it, get input on it, and then make small adjustments, right? Those small adjustments, those pivots, that's what allows you to grow exponentially. That's what allows you to beat people that are better funded, smarter, better leveraged, because most people aren't willing to do this long term. This can be exhausting if you're not completely married to this. This takes a lot of work, and guess what it also takes? No ego. You're not the smartest person. You're not doing what you want to do. You're just putting something in motion and watching what the people, right? Watching the feedback that comes in from it. How many of you truly, before you deploy a new feature, deploy a new platform, go through this? Or are you just trying to get it done, get quick input from a stakeholder, right? Because you want to go to that next project. This is something that on our product team, I can't emphasize enough to them, right? This is the constant battle that goes on is, I want to deploy code, I want to get a lot of it done. Okay, did you go and get input from stakeholders? Yes, one person, and they didn't email me back. But hey, I tried to get input, right? That is the process that you don't want too much input, right? You don't want to be overwhelmed. You don't want every salesperson calling up being like, I'm so glad that you have asked for input. I'm going to tell you everything that you should be doing, right? But at the same time, you need input from the field. We all need input from the opposite side, right? We all need to find that counterbalance. How do you get good, quick, actionable intel and then make a move on it, right? You don't want to spend 2 weeks getting intel, but you got to hear from other people. Otherwise, you have to literally be the smartest person in the world, because that's the only way that you're going to be able to figure out what people want and need. So I'll tell you about our journey and how we used a lot of pivots, a lot of spirals to get to where we are today. And once again, I'll kind of give you some peer fit history as we go, but we are one of the fastest growing companies here on the East Coast. Not the East Coast of Florida, I mean the East Coast. Certainly can't say that for San Francisco because their metrics. The only thing that has more inflation out there is their taxes. So, I enjoy staying on the East Coast. So it all started, my God, look at us, right? Just a bunch of college grad students, long hair. I'm wearing sandals in this picture, in shorts nonetheless. So we started out with a really simple idea, which was the fitness industry was really stale. At the time, when a gym wanted to give out their schedules, they were printed out PDFs. And at best, that PDF was online to download. And if they changed their schedule, every month you had to go online and be like, oh, did they upload a new PDF? Oh, is this from spring or is this from summer? It was a mess. And so we knew that we wanted to digitize the way that gyms could put their information related to classes out there. That was about all we knew. We just knew that that process was terrible. We thought at the time that what we would do is we digitize all these calendars. You can aggregate calendars from different gyms, and then that access would make you more likely to go. Well, turns out that's not what we do today, so clearly we had some spirals. What happened was we started letting people give feedback because people said, oh, this should be like Yelp. Let people give feedback on the best classes. And as we started going through some user testing, do you know what we found out? Why do I care what the best class is when I'm locked into a 12-month contract? It's completely worthless for me to know that down the street there's an amazing class and my friends go to it because I can't go. I have one membership. My membership's locked into one place. And all of a sudden we looked at each other and were like, how stupid are we? Of course this information is worthless to people if they can't hop around. The real problem we're trying to solve here isn't information, it's in fact access. That's the problem. And as we got into the access game, what we figured out was, well, I don't want to just have access across multiple planes. I want to have access to all of my funds across multiple planes. So that's where we had a lot of cycles and a lot of pivots from. We were a direct-to-consumer information play, then we were a direct-to-consumer membership play, then all of a sudden we needed to funnel your employer insurance works at wellness dollars in. And so in a matter of a year and a half, we literally went from a Yelp for fitness to kind of like a coupon book, temporary access between, to an ongoing membership, to a complete enterprise health program. And so that seems like a long time to some people. That seems like an incredibly short time to some people. But during that time, we went a lot of different ways, tried a lot of different things, spent a lot of money that resulted in nothing except one thing. It put us on the path that we're on today. That's the important part. You don't look at all the failures and think what could have been, except you look at the path it put you on. That's the important part. So we went from this hideous logo on the left all the way to this beautiful logo on the right. Maria's so happy right now. Once again, I show you this because this wasn't a straight line to get here. And once again, even at the time, we thought we had the best that we had at this time. It's not like we were all like, hey man, this logo sucks, but let's just move with it anyways, right? This was the best in that spiral we had put together. And just like I'm sure a year or two from now, we'll look back on this logo and be like, can you believe we used that logo in 2018 for so long, right? That's the beauty of spiral design. That's the beauty of pivots, is that you're always progressing forward. You're always getting better. And if you think that way, the one thing that you eliminate from your vocabulary is looking backwards and saying, well, why did we do that way, right? You just look at it and say, that was the best we did at that time. It allows you to always be looking forward and looking at how do you get better, not examining where you are in that moment and saying, well, should we make this better? No, look forward. What do you want to do forward? And that's why I always love these logos, is because Maria wants to vomit every time she sees this old purple one, and I'm nostalgic because I remember what it took to get that, and I remember what it took to get to this one. In fact, the one on the right, you probably don't know the story, Maria. I was actually getting on a cruise ship, and we had hired a consultant, and they're like, the only time we can present these new logos to you is on Friday at 5 p.m. And I was like, I'll be taking this phone call from the cruise ship as we're kicking off port. And I was like, we have 21 minutes, I think, till we go out of range. So let's plow through this as quickly as possible. But even, at the time, I remember the stories where, well, that looks like FedEx logo. We can't use that. Maybe that looks like Walmart's star. We can't use that. Whatever, I don't care. It hadn't stopped us, so we're fine. This is our team at PeerFit. The reason I show you this is because that slide from 2 slides ago, the 4 of us sitting with one of the trainers that was using PeerFit, it is in fact the spiral process that got us from 4 people to 40 people, right? When we took this up in Boston a month and a half, 2 months ago, we're just over 40 people. Guys, we're at like 70 since then. We have almost doubled our number of staff every couple of months here in the last year and a half because we finally hit some of these killer inflection points. Fun story about that night. So we're at Fenway up in Boston, and we rented out this little pavilion, if you can see all the grass up there. And out of nowhere, we're all just standing around. Big Papi, I don't know if you guys know who that is, right? Legendary Hall of Fame Red Sox player, just comes walking through our section. It's a private thing. He's like, just going and saying hi. And these two ginger twins right over here literally walks up, just gives them some dap, walks through our section and goes on. No fanfare, no nothing. And everyone's like, this was the greatest all hands ever. So I will just say our approach to how we build teams is the same way. I put this picture up here because half of these people were that original group, and each one of them have had 3 or 4 different roles at PeerFit. And they do it with a smile. And they do it because they know every aspect of how we approach the business is about iterative design. It's about pivots. And if you can find good, talented people that you like to work with and have positivity and can understand and digest that you're always going to make pivots, you can move them throughout the organization. You can be moved throughout the organization, which is why I always try to say the word role instead of job. Sorry, I'll stop touching the mic. I have a role at PeerFit, and that might change. My title might change. But it doesn't matter. I'm there to contribute, and when I'm in a role, I have a certain set of specific deliverables that I need to do. And so that's what I would also encourage you all to remember, is that you all play a role on your team, and that role can change. In fact, that role probably should change. The more that you're there, the more experience that you have, just to give you different viewpoints to the entire organization. All right, so let's talk about what PeerFit's been able to do. So over here on the left is some user participation rates. Now, unless you all happen to be in the wellness industry, this has no context. So allow me to provide some. What is it? Information without context is worthless, right? So in wellness, they think that the world sunsets on what was the engagement rate. And when they say engagement rate, they mean who signed up for your program. Not who actually participated ongoing, just who signed up for your program. And you have the best wellness program in the world if you have 20% people enroll, okay? 1 out of every 5 people participates. You can see our participation rates over here. Obviously just kills that, and I think that's why we've been able to grow so quickly, and a lot of that has to do with Emma, who's right here, and her team, the account management team, and the marketing team. And the reason we always divide it up small, lower mid, higher mid, and large is because they all have very different engagement rates. As you might imagine, if you have an employer of 20 to 50 people, it's a lot easier to drive engagement than if you have 5,000 people over several sites, several cities, very bureaucratic. That's why we do it this way. How we get participation has been an iterative process. When we first started, everything was an on-site rollout. We sent people tabling materials, printed flyers, stayed there for several days, took people out to happy hours. Not overly scalable, right? However, necessary at that time. When you only had a handful of clients and you had to make it work, you had to go do that. And every rollout was a new spiral for us. Every one was, we're going to do the best that we can, we're going to learn what we can, and then we're going to change it come the next one. And some of those changes, by the way, set you back. But if you're going mousetrap, then you know exactly what set you back because you know the small change you made. Over here, average engagement by industry. Why is this important? Once again, this is engagement versus participation, simply because I'm sure you would imagine it's a little bit easier to get a young, cool tech company to participate in PeerFit than it might be a large bureaucratic government organization. But hey, you join the government for the benefits, right? That's what they say. But you'll see, look, the first one up here, which is, I have a laser pointer, hold on. Look at that, people. All right, distribution, and there's a trucking thing on there. Trucking distribution. How the heck did we get a bunch of truck drivers and warehouse workers to participate in PeerFit? Honestly, I don't know, because I'm not the one who did it, but Emma and Maria's team did, and guess what? They've done a lot of cycles, right? They've done a lot of cycles of what works with those people. And you'll see it all the way through, technology companies, financial companies, and of course, government. But even still, 9% of their people engaging in going to classes. So if if 20% just signing up is the greatest thing in the world, if we're getting 9% of the people regularly, weekly, going to studio classes, I mean, that's a powerful situation that we've been able to do. And it wasn't because we're the smartest ones in the room. It wasn't because we had the secret sauce right on our first try. It's because every rollout we did, we asked ourselves, what can we do better? What can we do different? So our market growth, I'll tell you why this is one of my favorite slides that we have. I'm gonna use my laser pointer again here. Right here's Florida. We're a Florida-based company, and for the longest time, as you might imagine, most of our clients were in Florida. Most of our staff was in Florida. So Florida was always the #1 places where we were seeing reservations and gym traffic. The day that it no longer was #1 in the country for us was a huge victory. That means we were scaling correctly, right? We had exited from just a Tampa company to a Tampa Jacksonville company to a Florida company to a nationwide company. And if I happen to ever see you all again in a presentation, maybe a year from now, this won't be market growth statewide. This will be which countries and territories are growing the fastest for us, because that's how fast we're growing. Our CFO had just exited a health tech company, had a $250 million exit. She was their CFO, came over to us and she said, man, we were running fast there. And she said, but at PeerFit, things that took us a year and a half to do there, we're doing it in 6 months. And I would say the reason we've been successful and the wheels haven't come off, well, these two guys sitting up front here, right? Jason and Adam, who are Jacksonville people, is because everyone has that approach of fast cycles. When something goes wrong, it's not, look what wrong, what was the blame? It was, what did we learn and what are we gonna change? What did we learn and what are we gonna change? That's the reason why we've had such tremendous growth so quickly. And you might ask yourself, why are Kansas and North Carolina, typically unhealthy states, some of our most popular ones? Once again, we just have great clients and we have great engagement strategies. And that's how we've been able to have more traffic there than we do in California and Florida and New Jersey. So I put this slide up. This is not about our presentation. I stole this from one of my other presentations. And I put it up to kind of showcase to you all our approach when we talk to clients, when we talk to anyone. Right? This is from our sales decks. And what does it say? We are constantly evolving. This is not just something that I'm talking to you all about. This is literally our ethos. This is in our sales deck. This is everything that we talk to people about when we hire a new person and say, you might have several different roles here. You might jump around between different departments. We tell our clients this. We constantly evolve, and that's really our pledge to them, say, give us feedback. What features do you want to see? Where do you want to see this direction go? And we're not a big carrier where we can only make changes on January 1st of every year, deploy it and can't touch it the rest of the year, right? We're going to have 6 different app updates between now and the end of the year probably with new features, cleaned up things that we didn't think about, things that on paper we thought were fantastic, and then we get out to the market and we're like, people hate that, right? But that's okay. That's what the process is about, quick cycles and learning. All right, so I've got 3 lessons for us to talk about today. These are the ways that I try to approach spiral design, making pivots, and being on a team that makes a lot of pivots. The first one is you can't drive looking backwards, or you can't drive by looking in the rearview mirror. I kind of touched on this already, right? And the way that I always think about this is the rolling stone gathers no moss. If you're always moving forward, you don't always have to be going in a straight line. You don't always have to be going exactly where you're going, but you should always be rolling forward. That is one of the things I would impart on you. And by the way, I looked up this phrase. This is not an overly positive phrase. I use it all the time, thinking you should always be moving. The purpose of this is to say that if you don't stand still, you'll never prosper and build things around you. And I was like, well, we'll forget about that side of the phrase, because what I want you all to know is that you should always keep moving. Whether you're moving forward or not, just keep moving. Or as Dory says, right, just keep swimming. There it is. So the next lesson that I want to impart is get right back up. I put this in there for you, right? It's a golf, right? So how many of us have seen people, Jacksonville's a big golf community. I'm not a golfer. They hit it right on the edge of the water, and one leg's in the water, and you end up seeing them fall. And the reason I chose this is because they're always dressed up. Golfers love to be dressed up in their polos and their fancy, everything. And then they completely eat crap and fall down. And what are you supposed to do at that point? You're dressed up. You're supposed to be professional. You're soaking wet or you're muddy. You have one of two choices, right? You can own it and get right back up and you've got 10 more holes left, or you can pout the rest of the time. And I look at this as, I love this analogy because how many of us have gotten punched in the gut? How many of us have gotten kicked in the teeth when we thought we were coming in, we're feeling good, we're gonna make that big presentation or tell our boss something that we put together and just something terrible happens. Maybe you did it, maybe it happened to you. How do you respond? And I think this is one of the more crucial lessons when it comes to iterative design. The idea is you're always going to have something go wrong. How do you know what to fix if you didn't find something wrong? And so no matter how formal the situation, no matter how many people are in front of you, don't ever be ashamed when something goes wrong. Just get right back up and pitch again. Go to your next spiral. Go to your next cycle. That's what it's about. I went to the University of Florida, and my roommate was a manager for the baseball team. And I remember meeting a lot of the team and the coaches, and the pitching coach, I remember telling me, he says, Ed, I gotta tell you, something's wrong with our pitchers. They're all really weird. And I said, well, what do you mean? He goes, but I recruit weird ones because you want someone who throws, has a home run come off of that, and is like, anyway, my stuff's still the best and I'm gonna pitch anyways, right? Because they've got to finish the game. He says, I have to go and recruit delusional people. So I think about that, like, you've got to be a little delusional some days, right? You've got to know that you just walked in, something went terribly wrong, and say, that's okay, right? Because you're going to go change it. You're going to create your next spiral, but you just got to be positive. You got to keep moving forward. So I tell this story, probably my worst punch in the gut moment, just to kind of share we're all human, we've all been there. Early in PeerFit's life cycle, we had raised some friends and family money. We'd started getting some clients, hiring some people. So at this point, if you were to run out of money, that would be a very terrible thing, right? It wasn't just like me and my co-founders. We had a staff, we had clients. And we had gone through the whole diligence process. They told us the money is yours. We're just going through the rubber stamp process with me and my partners. It's good to go. Start hiring some people. We'll have this closed in the next 2 weeks. How do you think that ended? Something went wrong. For the first time in their 32 investments, they didn't get a rubber stamp process. And I had to call my partners and tell them, we're not getting money. And we're running out of cash in a couple of days. And by the way, this was our only due diligence final, and we're done, right? It was the hardest moment of my life because fundraising is my activity. It's my role on the team was to go and get that. And I told them, I got this, guys. Don't worry. You go worry about the business. And I got a big fat no when I was expecting to be throwing myself a parade that day. And someone gave me some really great advice. They called me up from that firm. They told us no. And he said, well, now's your opportunity to show if you're a startup CEO or not. You're going to have to work twice as hard. You're going to have to get into my partners any way that you can, find their friends, find their family, convince them to change their mind, get a second meeting, and have to pitch. And going into that pitch, you're going to know that they don't like you because you probably coerced your way into getting another meeting. And they told you no the first time when it was a neutral playing field. And it took some months. And guess what? We got it. We got the investment from them. They invested in us a second time. And then we actually cashed them out for 8x a few years later. What a disturbing picture. So the other part of making pivots is to just make decisions quickly. How many of you have ever been in a meeting with someone who just won't make a decision, right? It is painful. It's more painful than watching this Band-Aid being ripped off someone. I can't urge you strongly enough of, you're gonna make mistakes. Your spiral is not gonna look clean like our academic one, right? Sometimes you're gonna curve right back in because you didn't make the right decision, but just make decisions quickly. Once again, plow through a lot of cycles. That's what matters, unless you happen to be the smartest person. That's the only way to eliminate doing this. If you're not the smartest person in the entire world, then just make a decision, monitor what happens, and make a change off of it. That's what I would say. The reason I put this up here is I get pitched businesses a lot. As someone who's now, once again, we're not in San Francisco, we're not in New York City as a headquarters, right? We don't just get to raise money off of an idea on a napkin and get millions of dollars. You all are in, I'm guessing, mainly the Florida ecosystem. It isn't easy to raise money, right? They have you come and kiss the ring, and then that's only for a $100 check. But, so we have raised almost $30 million at this point. And our first $400,000 was off of $5,000 checks. So think of all of the lovely experience that I got to do as I evolved our pitch along the way. But it gave me great perspective of understanding how to pitch, what people ask, and if something's a good idea or not. And so this is what I always, when I talk to people, really simple. I have an idea. Great. Does it work? Yes, great, you're gonna get funding. If not, just go right back to the drawing board, right? What did you learn in that pitch? Make little changes. Your idea might not be bad. Maybe the distribution part of the idea is bad, or maybe the technology is bad, or maybe it's just the wrong order of operations with how you see things. So this is such a simple idea that, once again, iterative design doesn't just help you when you're writing code, when you're building a marketing plan, but even in the most basic structures of when you're creating a new business. I mean, I'm sure all of you have had an idea for a business at some time. Some of you probably have even attempted it, and that's, whether it worked or didn't work, the idea is, if it didn't work, no big deal, right? Let's go right back to the drawing board. What did we learn this time so that it can be better next time? And so now really what I wanted to do is just kind of walk you through our pitch. And the reason I do this is not to try to sell you PeerFit, because none of you are HR people. This is literally to show you our iterative process that we've taken with our own materials, our own sales pitch, and show you. So this seems like a pretty innocuous, straightforward title slide, right? Oh my gosh, do you know how many times this one line has changed on this deck? 1,000. And then it went back to this after we changed it, and then it came back to it again. So like, I show you this to say, like, while we all agree this image was great, and we agreed that that's the exact position PeerFit should go, and it used to be at the top, even this one line has changed, and we'll change it when we come out of pitch and say, oh, you know what, someone asked a question or made a comment, should we change it? It is a never-ending process, even on the sales side, how we approach, how we talk about our company, right? Clearly I made this deck. I always tell everyone, our industry, people were frustrated. We're gonna give you free money, but you have to fill out paperwork and scan it every single month, and it'll be for $15. And you can only use it if you sign up to one location, and it's gotta be a year-long contract. That's terrible, right? It's a terrible industry standard. And they said, well, if you don't want that, we can give you gift cards, because that really promotes wellness. I know giving out Applebee's and TGI Friday gift cards really, really promotes me to live a healthier lifestyle. Their cheese sticks are great, though. And Adam put together this slide. We always joke, because like, this is what we think about at big box gyms. It's a bunch of dudes lifting weights, right? It's a cult who go there and check each other out in the mirrors and are like, you see these biceps, right? Who wants to work out there? I mean, they do, but we don't, right? The rest of us don't. So we said, look, what ultimately we want to provide people is getting rid of the stack of papers that I have to deal with, that the HR person has to deal with, and give them choice. Whatever you happen to be in the mood for, you should get to do it. If Adam wants to put on his mermaid leggings and go to Pilates later today, hey, right? We should let him do that. That's what we wanted to bring to people, and wanted to do it in a really clean, simple fashion. So, by the way, guess how many attempts it took to figure out which tiles and which sizes we were going to put together there. So ultimately, we came down to give our mission. We wrapped it up and said, we want to redefine wellness. And I'll tell you, this was one of our best spirals we ever had. It was someone who she was a Jacksonville individual. She worked at Florida Blue. Then we hired her as an employee. Then she became a consultant and does a lot of consulting everywhere. She called us up one day and said, you guys have a great product. You've got clients. You're growing. But we have no rallying cry. Where's the one word, one phrase rallying cry that anyone can get behind? And we looked and said, my God, that's genius. And then about 30 spirals went around of what is that rally cry, right? I mean, we went back and forth a lot. What is that? And finally, it hit. And guess what? We've kept it that way ever since. That's how good that spiral was. It reached the end of the paper. It's on the back of every one of our business cards. It's in every one of our slide decks. I use it as a constant phrase out of my mouth more than almost anything. It was just a clean, simple clarity moment that you get those sometimes. You get those wins. So I'll end with this. How many of you all have seen these commercials, right? The Colonel. I loved when they did Reba, by the way. That was a pretty good one. So the reason I put this up here is twofold. One, after they decided to re-bring the Colonel out, they said, who's the one person that can embody him? No one. So why don't we do a bunch of changes, right? Well, this will be for this demographic, and this can be in this, and there'll be the different flavors, right? They're going to iterate what Colonel Sanders means to people. I thought that was amazing, example of pivoting. They understood that their whole campaign was, let's make pivots. We're going to tell you right now, we're going to do 6 of them this year. I loved that. But the real reason I put this up here is, how many of you know the story behind Colonel Sanders and KFC? Right? A couple of you? Talk about a disastrous situation. This poor guy, if you read, just look up like a one-paragraph thing on his life, you talk about failure just falling at your feet over and over and over again. All right, he opens his first, motel and restaurant. It catches fire and burns down. He opens his next restaurant and his wife divorces him and takes all of his money. He goes and gets another restaurant right where they're building the new interstate, and the interstate plans get shut down and they build the interstate somewhere else. I mean, this poor guy, right, went through it all. But if you read, he kept trying and he kept iterating, right? He went from just a restaurant to a motel to a restaurant motel, right? Every time he iterated along the way. Then when he was, I think, 50 years old, he had $150 or something like that. He's perfected his, how many spices is it? 7 spice, whatever. 11, thank you. Right? And he said, I'm not going to be in the restaurant business. I'm going to go sell my spice recipe to restaurants. That was his pivot. I'm not going to do the restaurants myself. I'm going to go sell it to restaurants. I'm going to give them my chicken. And got told no a lot. Door slammed in his face many, many, many times until it didn't. And I have to imagine that it was because every pitch he learned something a little bit different, and he evolved that pitch a little bit more. And by the time he was on his 1,000th pitch, it wasn't that all of a sudden his spices were better. He understood how to deliver what they were looking for in a way that they couldn't say no. And so that's what I'll leave you with is whether you're writing code, whether you work in marketing, whether you work in administration, whether your role changes from team to team to team, I would encourage you all to think about how does every experience give you one small little nugget so that you get to make quick little pivots every day rather than really big ones. I bother the crap out of my board and I always give them tons of information, and I do it so there never has to be a big decision. I know that if I get their input every single day, I avoid ever having to have a big discussion, big decision. I get a lot of little yeses along the way. So with that, I will open it up and let's do some questions. Don't all start at once. Yeah.
Have you ever thought about applying this to or adding in dance studios, martial arts studios, things like that?
So he asked if we had thought about adding dance studios, martial arts studios. We already have them. So right like a few feet away from us, there is a dance studio, Dance Trance, which I have done. And yes, we've got dance studios, martial arts studios. We got all kinds of things. We've even contemplated, and once again, we talked about iterating. Originally, we started with just studios. Then we added studios and personal training, studios, personal training, and gyms. And then with the gyms, we only did drop-ins. Now we do drop-ins and memberships. So we're constantly evolving the offering as well. Look, we're not married to any idea in terms of we're the currency. We're not actually a wellness company. We're a financial tech company inside of wellness, right? We're the grease to the wheel that allows the money to go to these places. Yeah.
Have you guys ever kind of spiraled back to direct to consumer, or if you guys stuck to enterprise? I didn't set that up on purpose.
I'm not allowed to answer that question, but I bet if you were to watch a press release coming out in the next 6 to 8 weeks, you'd see something. It's funny way how spirals come back, right? Maybe we'll title that project Back to the Future. I like that. The Marty McFly project. What else? Advice, ideas you've been working on, troubles you've been having on something. You don't have to be the smartest person in the room to get input. You're scratching your head. I almost wanted you to just stand up and talk anyway, since you had your hand up.
I was going to ask what your next pivot is, but it might be related to this.
Yeah. So I will, that's an interesting question because for my role in the company, which has evolved a lot, right? In the beginning, when it's a 5-person team, I get to be salesperson and marketing person and product designer. And then as you get a little bit bigger, then it's a little less hands off. And now, right, I have to think about this ecosystem. And so when I think about the company, rarely do I think about one product or one campaign. Think about the ecosystem we're trying to build. And hypothetically, if there were a direct-to-consumer product line and there were an enterprise health product line, right? You think about, is that the company, or is there new things that you can do? And so what I would say the next pivot is how do you commercialize your existing core business in a lot of different ways? So our core business is taking money, pushing it to studios, and bringing data back. So you can do that with employer and insurance money. You could hypothetically, academically do it with individuals' money. And there starts to be some other types of payers that you can do that with. So I would say all of our next pivots and cycles that we're doing are all around how do you monetize the core business different ways without having to become a different product or a different company. So, I'll use Amazon as an example, right? They were their website delivery business forever. But then they realized they could leverage lots of little things off of that experience. That's what I would say is on our mind a lot right now, is pivoting little small value adds to the core business where we don't have to reinvent ourselves, but can really help build out the experience. And that's all I'm allowed to say, otherwise she'll tackle me. Yeah?
So with health and wellness, obviously healthy eating is also something that people look at. Is there potential to partner with either companies like Sunbasket or local meal prep companies that would be able to help people out as well?
Did someone pay you to ask that question?
I
We get
like to cook, so I'd much rather have someone else.
we get approached a lot about this topic, and I get it, right? If you are one of these local meal prep companies, there's only so many consumer dollars in there, so it's a very crowded space. So your natural next thing is, well, we should do enterprise health. Why reinvent the wheel? PeerFit's already got all the money for us. Let's just go pitch PeerFit. They should allow the money to come to our meal prep services. So every single meal prep company, I think, has a tracker on me, and I'll be going to my car and like, hey, Ed, I'd like to talk to you about meal prep, right? So I don't know where we're going to go with that one. What I would say, just kind of unofficially, is I would imagine our offerings would be expanded into acupuncture, physical therapy, massages before it would get expanded into meal prep for a really simple reason. It's tough to track. I can track that you went to an acupuncture, right? Everything's about data with us. I can track that Joe Smith made a reservation to get a massage and that he went. I can't track that a meal was delivered and that you actually picked it up and you're actually the one who did it. For all I know is I allocated money to the employee as the carrier, and you just bought a meal for your wife, which sometimes they don't want, right? They only want it going directly to the employees. They want to be able to track it. So it's not that we don't believe food is an important part of wellness. I just don't know if that's our best, move from an order of operations perspective. Some other hands, yeah.
So as you have, I have to imagine you have a lot of opportunities coming your way. So how do you deal with like opportunity paralysis, where there's so many things happening? How do you decide what to pivot on?
I click forward, Jason Perry, send, right? So Jason's our chief strategy officer, AKA anything I don't want to make a decision, I'm like, Jason, check this out, right? Right, it goes back to your question. So my role has changed dramatically, and a year ago, I had to vet out all these opportunities, and most of the time, if it wasn't immediately, obviously valuable to what we were working on, I just had to ignore it. That's what I had to do at that time. But now, I've been able to scale myself, right? And I have Jason, who's with me all the time. So now I can focus on making decisions and letting him kind of sort through opportunities and vet them out. And once again, that's the idea of how do you scale yourself? How do you scale your role? And that's something, honestly, it goes back to being that pitcher's delusional. I'm really weird, and just certain things that probably bother other people don't bother me. I like working 18 hours a day. I like working at a 10 out of 10 at all times. And if I'm under that, I'm not really productive. I just go to a 0. So I would say that's how it works for me. I have no good advice of how you could do that. I'm sorry. I try to talk to a lot of people, is what I would say. And I don't mean like random strangers on the street, but my team, this group right here, if you pulled out their phones, I'm probably their number one call, except I'm their number one for each one of them. So, I bombard all of them. I just like to chew really quickly on things for 5 minutes with people and make quick decisions, rip off the Band-Aid. Yeah?
Particularly when you were, early on and in the growth phase, and you talked a lot about your team and
Yes, we're hiring.
yeah, no. as far as the culture and people having the same kind of mindset, how did you balance the need to add people quickly, but add the right kind of people?
Great question. All right, so it's all about culture. My role, both on day one and today, more so today, is I'm the chief cultural officer. That is my number one job that I have to focus on. There's an interesting saying, whether you're a really big company or a small company, if the CEO cares about it, everybody cares about it, right? What is the number one way that you can measure a wellness program is going to be successful? Is the CEO participating, right? So I would say that it is paramount to me about our culture, and thus it is paramount to everyone, right? We don't hire people without thinking about our culture. We're growing really, really, really fast, and because of where we are today, we've got inbound coming in. So we get to choose both good skill and good culture fits. And in fact, I would almost say that by and large, almost everyone has good skill that comes inbound now. So it's really being picky about culture. That's one of the first questions we look at. She called me with someone she was hiring last week, and she says, we don't need to talk about skill set. Is she a culture fit? So that's the beauty we have today. But I will tell you, early on, people said, oh, you have a good culture when you have 5 people. You won't at 10. We did. They said, well, you have good culture 10, but you won't at 20. And we did. And then they said, well, you won't at 30. And then we started winning awards for our culture at 30. And then we started winning more awards when we had 40. And now we just won a bunch of national awards when we had 50 people. So I think it comes down to a lot of spiral design is about being egoless. And it's about never worrying about blame. And I have this saying of, don't bring up a problem unless you want to hear the solution. Meaning, don't complain to me. Don't come and vent to me, because I don't care. And I mean it in the true sense, I just literally don't care. Don't come unless you're wanting to pick apart something and figure out the solution around it. And I think that goes hand in hand with our culture. It's amazing what a culture can be if you're just not allowed to complain. Right? People just inherently are slightly more positive. There's no blame that goes on. And then people just treat each other decently. Right? It is a sad statement, but a true statement to say, just by being decent, you're already ahead of 90% of cultures. And that's what I would say how we've done it, just be decent to people, don't allow complaining, and when people bring you a problem, only talk about the solution. So, yeah.
Are you using machine learning to sort through your feedback?
Other than a person on our staff whose name is the robot, no, we're going into that. We really want to look into how to, once again, we don't want to be the smartest people, so we don't want to be the ones figuring out how do we do recommendations and how do we present things. So there's going to be a lot of that, I think, in 2019, but not currently. Yeah.
How many pitches you've had at this point, and how would you compare that to, you say, your first or your 10th pitch?
Well, I've always think I was good at pitching, but I wasn't. So from like a sales pitch, right? I enjoy going out to the field and pitching to clients still. The difference is I don't go out to every single employer now. So I would say that we have come to a point where we almost know exactly what's going to be asked. We know the exact type of answer they need to hear. And there are certain things that you don't want to say in the pitch that you want them to ask so you can go down it. From an investment perspective, I always use this analogy of when a comedian goes on tour. Have you ever heard what they do? They go out to a bunch of hole-in-the-wall places and try their act out, right? Off the grid. They do their jokes in different order. They get their rhythm and timing down. They see what lands, what doesn't land. And because investment pitches are so different, I have to do that before we do investment pitches. I go out and kind of just pitch people we're not interested in because you don't know the rhythm that you need. You don't know the order of what you're going to hear, and you don't know the questions. So there is no more, in my mind, example of spiral iterative process than our investment pitches. Because from that cycle, that round we're doing, like maybe our Series B, from day 1 to day 30 is drastically different. And I would say generally it only takes about 30 days for us. And after that, it's baked in. We're good to go. And fortunate, again, our blessing of having to lift all those heavy rocks forever, we don't do a lot of pitching that way. It's inbound. Hey, let us tell you why you should take our money and get on your cap table. It's a very different world now, I'll tell you. It's a different world. Yeah.
When you first started going after investment money, did you guys try and build a prototype first and get users, or did you just say, hey, this is our awesome idea, can we have some money?
That was the pitch. I don't know how you found a recording of that, but yes. No, so the way we went about this was, okay, great idea. Put in some of our own money, which, by the way, we were grad students, so it's not like we just opened up our trust fund. And I know there's a lot of those here in Jacksonville, but not one of them. And we put in, a couple $1,000s, and we built the prototype ourselves. We always said, right, we knew enough to be dangerous. And that came to bite us in the ass later on. But we built our own prototype, and at that point, what do you have if you don't have a lot of money? Well, you have hustle. You can go get a lot of input. So rather than walking into an investor and saying, here's a prototype and I think it's gonna work, what we did, which was free, was every day we weren't in classes and working our 3 other part-time jobs, I got on the phone and called every different university gym I could. Hey, what are you using right now? Let me walk you through this prototype. What do you think? Back to this. We did 42 calls in 3 weeks to gyms, meetings. Think of how much further that pitch progressed, that prototype progressed. So when we finally went to some friends and family, it was, here's our prototype that has already gone through 42 different groups. 35 of them said yes, 7 of them said no, but we've heard feedback from them. This is gonna be our approach to them. Here's our early clients that are gonna use this, right? We walked in with all of that. Now granted, once again, it ended up not paying off in the sense of that's not what we do today, but we didn't just walk in and say, got a cool idea. What we demonstrated to them was we were willing to hustle, we were willing to put our own time, energy, and effort into it ourselves, and we were clearly very passionate about it. And oh, by the way, here's these results from these people that are actually interested in this is a problem that's being solved. That's what we walked in with. And I have no background in finance. I have no background in fundraising. I was a grad student with long hair and flip-flops. What I did was I talked to everyone I could. Not because I was trying to find money, but because I told you I'd like to talk to a lot of people. I like to chew through things, people. I talked to everyone I could about the idea so I could hear just a little feedback. And by talking to them about what we were building, they said, well, I'm an angel investor, or my buddy's an angel investor. Are you looking for money? They essentially helped fill in the gaps for us, right? What's the thing of, if you want money, ask for advice? It's kind of thing. Yeah.
What's the difference between an investor and an angel investor?
Ooh, good question. Segments of investors. So you'll hear this all the time, friends and family. This is typically, you're going to raise 50, maybe 100,000 if you're from a trust fund here in Jacksonville. Maybe you raise like $1 million from friends and family. But like generally, you're talking about $50,000 to $100,000, and you're getting people to write $5,000, $10,000 checks. These are not sophisticated investors. These are your parents and your grandparents who have saved their whole lives and like, yes, little Johnny, I can write you a $5,000 check. I believe in you, son or daughter, right? That's that. The next one up are angel investors. These are typically people who, same thing, they might be a business person, they might be a doctor, a lawyer, they've got more funds, but they do investing more regularly. They look at early stage companies. They're gonna write that $25,000, $50,000, $100,000 check still early in a life cycle. Then you'll have these super angels. They typically are doing this more regular. They're writing checks like $100,000, $200,000, maybe they're family funds. And then you get to the big areas. You always hear venture and private equity. These are groups that go out, they're groups, right? They're going out, collecting money from other people, creating funds whose sole job it is to deploy capital to growth companies, startup companies, tech companies, and things like that. They're writing $500,000, $1 million, or when you get up to like groups we'll talk to, they won't write a check for less than 10 million because they have a $300 million fund and they don't want to have to vet a bunch of deals to write 30 different checks. They want to write 5 or 6 checks. And each stage is looking for something totally different, right? The earlier on, they assume that 1 out of 20, 1 out of 30 deals will work out. All the way to when you get to private equity and some of these venture groups, they're expecting 1 out of every 2 deals to work out. But this group needs a 20x return. This group needs a 2 to 3x return. We were at a meeting with a group up in Boston who was like, look, I do Series C. We don't like to write checks less than $20 million. We're only looking for a 2 to 3x return, but we know our place in the world. We're not looking to take huge risks. We've got a bunch of connections. We're looking to sit on this for about 2 to 3 years, double what we got in it, and get out of it. And so, from an investment standpoint, something that's been really interesting for us is we've been really successful raising capital, and we've had such demand recently that we've just been able to take capital in and buy out and liquidate all of those early angels and friends and family. So imagine here in the state of Florida, which isn't known for having tons of investors or ones that have had a lot of successes, we did a 10x and an 8x for that group, right? We did a 10x return for most of our friends and family. Imagine that lawyer getting to go home to his wife and be like, remember when you told me I was crazy for investing in that weird grad student? Here's $50,000 for that $5,000 check we got, right? So there is a lot of capital that we've returned back into the ecosystem in this past year, is in December and January. So, there was about $4 million that we returned back off of that initial $400,000, friends and family group. So it's out there. Clearly, none of it's with me. I can tell you that. What else? Nothing? I'll be around after. Yeah, go ahead.
I guess specifically with you mentioned it when it came to the redefining fitness.
Redefine wellness.
Redefine wellness. That at some point you stopped spiraling on that.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm sure there's still people after that who questioned it, who thought, hey, here's something better.
Yeah.
When do you know to stop wasting time spiraling on something and that's as good as it can be?
So I try to believe that there's no such thing as good or bad. There's effective and ineffective. And there's a point where you have just the law of diminishing returns. At what point are you putting in effort and you're not increasing the effectiveness of what you're doing anymore? It's not that redefined wellness is the greatest thing since sliced bread, but it is. But what will happen is we thought it was so effective of what we needed it to do, we said, that's this project, wrap. When we need to do something else, we're not going to improve on that. We'll start a whole new campaign, right? We'll do Rallying Cry 2.0. It's like, think about it, your brand. Companies can't change brands every 2 weeks unless you're IHOP. But other than that, right, like you have to reach a point where you say, that's good enough for this color scheme and this brand. If we want to adapt it, we'll do it in version 3.0 2 years from now when we're going to update the brand collectively. Little edits are out the window, right? That's how I personally feel about the Redefined Wellness Rallying Cry. Is that was our Rallying Cry 1.0, and it's going to stay that way because that's not something that should regularly change. We'd sound psychotic if every time we're like, no, but seriously, our new mission is, right? We would sound crazy. So that is the essence of what we do until we have our new Rallying Cry, maybe with some of these other pivots that are coming out in the next few years. So.
I got a prompt question. One, I think that you.
How dare you?
Yes. I think when you look at the early stages of the company versus the progression, I think one of the things that PeerFit did well is finding the right partners when you were going through the investment from friends and family to angel, where now you're taking real money from real people that are somewhat sophisticated, and you're going to get pressured to give these people certain power over your business, to form a board. I think one of the things that made us successful was you navigated that well in finding the right partners that were the right money early on, that didn't come in and try to do too much of the business. How did you go through the process of finding the right partners there?
I would say, by the way, I did not tell him to ask that question.
You did not.
To your question earlier about culture, this was the same thing how we approach investors. Yes, technically you're desperate, you need their money, but to what end are you willing to take it? If you're going to let them come control your business, it's their business, right? You have the wrong dynamic from day one. And I have a philosophy of negotiation, which is you don't sit across table from people and negotiate. That's a no-win situation. You want to sit next to people and you want to basically be very candid and say, I don't want to negotiate. Here's the things that I need, and I know these are the things that you need. How do we build a structure where this works? And we always made it very clear that we were the experts. We were going to go do this. We want input from them. We're going to listen to input from them. So there's no need to look over our shoulder. But it was aligning culturally that with our investors. Because I'll tell you, there's a group who invested in us. And I was sitting in a CEO roundtable. And I was talking to another CEO, same investor in their group. Night and day difference. They're collaborative, they're helpful with us because that's how we aligned with them culturally on day one. You're not going to come in and run, rickshaw on us. We're in charge, but we're gonna let you be collaborative. Once again, there's no ego here. No one, if I don't have an ego, then you can't have an ego. Goes back to if it's important to the CEO. Well, if I as the CEO am not a jerk, then no one's allowed to be a jerk, right? However, with this other group, they have a CEO who allows that. He kind of is a jerk from time to time. He has more of an ego, so his investor thinks he's not coachable. If you have an investor or a board member that thinks you're not coachable, man, they're going to force it down your throat. So that's what I would say is the way that you do it is to be coachable. The way you do it is to be honest, transparent, and constantly communicate with them. Those are the things that are absolutely, and when you find someone that doesn't align with you, walk away. It's just really simple. You just have to have the discipline to do it. That's all things in life. Thank you for coming out. I appreciate it. I'll be around.